Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to help chiropractors simplify the marketing and the mindset necessary so they can make more money, have more impact, and bring more enjoyment into their lives and their practice. Now, when I started chiropractic about 25 years ago, the Everest or the 4-minute mile for many of us was the idea of the $1 million practice. That when you reach this foreign land, all of your dreams would be fulfilled. Now, in clarity or transparency rather, I never quite got to the $1 million practice and I still had a pretty fulfilling practice life. Now, of recent, something has been popping up in my Instagram feed, and it's been this chiropractor not only talking about the $1 million practice, but she's added some real spice to it. She's been talking about the part-time $1 million practice. I guess that's the evolution of things over the last 25 years. Now, needless to say, I was super intrigued. I checked out some of her content and I got some recommendations that she was the real deal. So I couldn't wait to chat with her on the podcast. Now, her name is Nona Djavid. She's a wonderful chiropractor. And in today's episode, we break down exactly what you need to do, the mindset, the strategies, so you too can have a part-time $1 million practice. This episode is fantastic. I love chatting with Nona. She's an amazing person. Strap yourself in and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast, where we guide natural health and wellness experts through the pitfalls of marketing. Each episode, you'll learn simple, effective, easily actionable, and heart-centered marketing strategies. And here's your host, Angus Pyke.
Nona Djavid, welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Me too. Now, when I was, because I do a bit of a pre-stalk with all of these, and I found out that you know one of my absolute heroes. 15 years ago, I came across Michael Beckwith, and he just rocked my soul in a way very few people have in my 46 years of life. And so if our listeners haven't heard about Michael, can you tell them who Michael is and how was it that you had him write the foreword to your book?
Wow. Well, I wasn't expecting that. What a beautiful twist. All right. So Michael Beckwith, he was probably would be known for being on the film The Secret.
Yes.
So he was in that video. And it's been a while since I've watched it. I don't even know what he talks about. Something to do with law of attraction, bringing things into your reality.
Yes.
So that's when I first was introduced to Michael. And I am so lucky because Michael Beckwith has a church actually here in Southern California that is extremely popular. It's called Agape. And I've gone a few times. I connected with him early on, funny enough, through Twitter.
Okay.
And connected with him, just kind of shared how grateful I was for his message. And again, like to your listeners, I know you have listened to him, but when he gets on the stage and nowadays on the virtual stage, you can feel that he's channeling things in as he is, expressing all things about universal intelligence, innate intelligence. He talks a lot of chiropractic. He talks a lot of health. He is just one of my favorite people. And so we kind of connected and I connected with him. I connected with a couple of other people at the church and I simply asked him and he wrote the foreword to my book.
Yeah. Well, very envious of that. I got to go to his church once when I was in California as well. It was one of the highlights because seeing him in person, I'm trying to think whether it was a podcast that I used to listen to or some version, because it's a long time ago. And I can't remember how I came across him. Maybe it was The Secret there too. But what struck me was the language that he used is very chiropractic. He does talk a lot about a universal intelligence and innate intelligence. And I'm sometimes, I get a bit stuck with some of the woo-woo, but he talks in a way that just, spoke to my analytical mind, connected with my heart as well. And I've not listened to a lot of Michael's stuff of recent, and in seeing that, I'm like, I've got to get back into that again. Tell us a little bit about your book, and let's start with that.
Yeah, so the book, funny enough with the book, I had been at the time for years and years. I felt like I have a book inside of me, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was going to be, or how it was going to be written and things like that. So I would sit down, this would go on for years and years. And I would, hey, maybe I'll do page, 1 page a day or whatever. And I'd done that for so many times, or for so long. And then I met someone who became my best friend fairly immediately. And this woman, her name is Lonnie Barron. So we sat down and we really connected. And I told her about my vision for Elevate. And next thing you know, her and I are meeting every Thursday. And within the next 3 months, this book was born. So it's really all the ideas and concepts that makes someone's life, business, relationship, health, all of those different categories successful, but from an energetic, tiny bit of spirituality, not like too woo-woo out there, but with a twist on all of those. So it's these principles that are practical in the day-to-day life that we can practice to bring in the kind of life that we want into reality. And so that's how the book was born, within 3 months.
What was the difference kind of before and after? So you had a new best friend. What was it that you were doing, or what was it that changed in you that went from kind of struggling with this to all of a sudden completed in 3 months?
Okay. You may or may not like my answer because you already told me you have an analytical mind.
No, I'm good with the woo. I know I probably get way too dramatic about that, to be honest. I just don't like that as my default only strategy, but I've had too many experiences where I go, I can't explain that. But yeah, so go for it. Please don't worry about that at all.
All right, well, I'll tell you anyways. I believe that Elevate, it was like, so this is how I think about my business. And actually I teach my chiropractors and healthcare professionals I work with, I teach the same concept. Your business has an essence, it has a soul.
Yes.
Maybe not in reality, like I have a soul and you have a soul, and I won't get into that, but the business itself, there are things that it's coming to you and it wants to come into physical manifestation or physical reality, and it wants to experience certain things, right?
Yes.
So I remember one of the times I literally asked my practice, and this was before I turned this burnout that I was experiencing in practice and turning it into creating a practice that, later became a part-time $1 million practice. But I remember sitting in the thick of that burnout, and I asked myself a question of, if my practice was a person or had a soul or had an essence, what would it want? And then the answer came to me, and it was like, have fun. And so honestly, that was the beginning of everything. So now circling back into Elevate, I feel that Elevate this idea had been following me for years. And so when it was time and where the circumstances were right, the energy was right, met the right match, Michael Beckwith came to my life, all of those things kind of came together. And so it was the right time for Elevate to kind of take a life of its own. And I'll fast forward a little bit. Just today, I met with my new business partner around Elevate, where we're going to create retreats for entrepreneurs where we incorporate these concepts. So it's gone through this journey, this map of evolution. And to answer your question, it really was just like timing. And it seemed like it was the right thing to do at the time. And the book was born.
I've been fascinated. One of my favorite kind of chiropractic quotes, and something I would talk with my patients about all the time, is the concept of the body needs no help, it just needs no interference. And my experience is the same for a business as well, in that your business needs no help, it just needs no interference. Let's get rid of what's the interference. And I wonder, was there an interference that was stopping you from writing the book, or was it really just timing? Was there something that you kind of let go of? Because so two questions there too. This idea of a soul and things having a soul, I believe that really strongly also. And the language that I often use is I kind of think about something that Tony Robbins taught me, this idea of desire. what is the desire of it? And he talks about the root word of that, Latin root of that word being of the Father, and that there is a desire inside of us that something is calling through. And we could call that soul as well. So was there an interference that was getting in the way? And how do we listen to that soul?
Man, that's so good. Such good questions.
It was about 5 questions I asked you there.
It's so good though. It's making me think. It's outside of the normal routine stuff I usually get. So going back, was there interference? Yes. And I think I was the interference, which is something that we all find. And I truly think that might be the only kind of interference is we get in the way. Otherwise, these things, these ideas, these concepts are about to be born, but we somehow get in the way and we are the interference to this massive thing that it could be transformational for us and other people.
I would agree that mostly, in fact, I can't think of any time that it's not some form of internal interference that kind of gets in the way. What's your process of being able to listen to your soul to keep on taking those steps as you want to expand forwards into retreats and things like that too? How do you separate, again, what might be the conscious mind from the unconscious mind?
Yeah. Okay. This is so juicy. So here's my process. And I actually, this was a conversation just this morning. So it's interesting as it's coming up again. I think starting with the end dream in mind, right? And typically, and let me break that down for a second, because people think, oh, in my practice, for example, I want these numbers, or they think of the end dream as a goal. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking this really juicy, expansive project or life or connection or wealth or health, whatever you want to experience, this life vision, like starting with that. And I want to break that down because there are 3 kinds of goals that you could have, right? Like there's the A-type goal. I learned this from Bob Proctor. There's the A-type goal, and that is something you've done before and that you can do again. Right? So, hey, I built a practice up to this number or whatever, and I could do it again. I bought a car, I know how to do it, and I can do it again. The second one is I haven't done it before, which is type B. I haven't achieved this goal, but I do know how to get it. Like, it's like, okay, well, I haven't lost 10 pounds, but I have all the tools and the strategies. I know how to lose 10 pounds. That's B. Then there is C, which is most people don't set those kinds of goals. And I like to, this is my interpretation, like beyond Bob Proctor, I call them the crazy goals, C for crazy.
Yeah, nice.
And so these goals are something that is just so massive that you have no idea how to get there. Yeah. And it creates a dream life for you. It creates a vision. It's not like a goal. It's not an ends to to meet something right over here and be done with it. It's an experience. It's an entire thing that you want to bring into your reality. And so that's my first go-to. And I use the same process in creating the Part-Time $1 Million Practice and now helping chiropractors in creating whether it's Part-Time $1 Million Practice or whatever kind of practice it is, but they got to start with what kind of life do I want to live? And then map out what it takes to actually get there. And that's my process. Now, in just that, if this vision is really, really clear for where I want to go, then it eliminates so much of the decisions, the day-to-day decisions about business, life, partners, partnerships, connection, health, all of those things. And so then the path is very clear. I know where I'm going. I know what gets me closer and what moves me away. Then I don't tolerate the things that don't serve me anymore on this path. So my go-to is always to go back to that vision.
Yep. So with that, my experience, sometimes personally, and certainly a lot of people that I work with too, I ran a little with my coaching clients recently. We talked about the concept of being a finisher, which was the idea that all of life's magic, if we're setting a goal, whether it even be an A, B, or a C goal there too, that all of the magic really happens with that last 1%, that we get to 99% of the way there, and there's a disproportionate payoff when we get through. And so many people in life have started lots of things, a bit like your book that you did forever there too, but getting through to be a finisher. So we said, okay, we're going to experiment with being a finisher. We're going to show you what it feels like to get all the way through things. So we've got 30 days, let's pick a goal. And it fascinated me how difficult it was for people to choose something. Like anything, like the goal is not important. The process that we're going to go through and you experiencing what it's like to complete something that you said. Why is it that we have difficulty actually choosing something? So for most people, even the idea of saying, if you said to a child, let's imagine a crazy goal, like that we sit and we fantasize about stuff all the time. But if you say to an adult that idea of a crazy goal, most people can tell you the things they don't want, but they have real difficulty choosing a crazy goal. Why is that?
Okay, so I think the reason people have a hard time choosing that crazy goal or tapping into it or even seeing it as a real thing, like, and Angus, I get this all the time. People approach me in the DMs on my Instagram and they're like, you're lying. You don't have, like, it's not possible to have a part-time $1 million cash base. So I'm not offended by that. I just see it that they don't see it as a reality because it hasn't happened for them or they haven't watched somebody do it, right? So why is it so difficult for people to have that juicy life or to create that juicy life? I think the answer is in patterning. You know, like when you're a child and you end up experiencing personally, or your parents will tell you about an experience, friends tell you about an experience of failure, of doubt, of not, that's not possible or can't be done or whatever. All of those things, they become the pattern that you have picked up on along the way. So the child at 7 years old, they think that they can create a car that flies. Like, this is my son, is what he's into right now.
Nice.
But when at my age, what I hear and see when he says car that flies, I'm thinking, well, how do you patent it? Does it already exist? How does it work? So there's all these doubts because I have picked them up along the way of how hard it is to create something like that, to invent something like that. Now, I'll go a step beyond that, challenge your analytical mind. But some people also believe in generational, if you believe in generational healing or generational trauma. My grandparents grew up poor. My parents grew up in the war at the time they lived in Iran, and there was war, there was scarcity around food, there was scarcity around money. I guarantee you I've picked up so much of that along the way. So when it's so repetitive and so deeply rooted, these patterns, then in order for me to choose a different pattern, I'm going to have to do something wildly different. Otherwise, I'm waking up, I'm repeating the same patterns, or if I'm a lot aware, I might make tiny movements or I don't want to be like my parents, or I want to create this. And then I start to make small changes and I have a different future and I have different thoughts than my parents did. But even then, it's incrementally small in terms of the amount of growth you can make from one generation to the next. So that patterning's gotta go if we want that juicy life. So that patterning is stopping us from seeing the possibility of this juicy, expansive life, business, connection, health, or any of those things.
Yeah, I love it. You've mentioned numerous times the concept of the part-time $1 million practice and talking about kind of difficulty believing, but all week I was looking forward to chatting with you because for most people, the concept, whilst we talk more about $1 million practice now than ever, and it might be a glimmer of possibility for a few people, I thought, I really want to kind of chat about that. And then I forgot until this morning, till I was reading through and preparing that, went, there's a part-time in front of it, which just stretched my brain even more. So let's go with this. Like, what do you mean by a part-time $1 million practice? Is it possible? What does it look like? Can anybody do it? Let's kind of dig into what that is and see if we can kind of open some of our listeners up that for some of them, they might not have even realized that this could be a crazy goal for them. But I'd love by the end of this, if they go, oh, maybe that is my crazy goal.
Yes, absolutely. So part-time $1 million cash practice.
Yep.
So in today's world of insurance. So let me back up and tell you the story of how it was created. And I think that gives it some foundation. When I first set out to have my business, I worked really hard. I hustled, and I had a really successful practice. I did take some insurance, and I hired practice management groups to kind of help me along the way, create some systems, be able to communicate, all of those things. And that was the first 3 years in my clinic and establishing on my own. And it worked. And I made money. But I also worked my butt off. But I also was a slave to my practice. But I was unable to create the kind of life I wanted. My practice seemed successful, but my life wasn't, because I didn't have any free time. I wanted to have a family at the time. Like, how do I create all this stuff that I want, having to be in the practice all the time? So then I burned out. Yep. And that was a blessing, because in those moments of burnout, I had to ask myself, well, what is it that I want in terms of the kind of life I want to live? So I started with, what kind of life do you want to live? And so I wrote down some of the things. And so coming back to answer your question, I wrote down that I want to work 20 hours a week. Now, when I say 20 hours a week, I'm not saying 20 hours in the office with office hours, and then another 10 hours in marketing, and then another 10 hours thinking about the stress of the practice and working on the business. No, not like that. 20 hours in the business, on the business. When I step out, I want to be completely done. I want to be disconnected. And who knows, maybe I do other projects. Maybe I have kids. Maybe I get into something else that's entrepreneurial. So I knew I wanted 20 hours a week. The idea of insurance was no longer aligned with where I wanted to go. So that's got to go. So then I dropped insurance year 3. Then I also knew that, and I know we're going to touch on this, but like for a lot of female chiropractors specifically, but also just generally chiropractors, they struggle with having a massively successful practice. And so they end up running a Mickey Mouse operation is what I would call it. So at the time I wrote down 20 hours a week, but I don't want a Mickey Mouse operation. I want it to be lucrative. I want it to be profitable. So I wrote down that I want to collect $1 million or more per year, and that I wanted it to be cash. So that was my starting point. And I do have to be transparent. I didn't go from 0 to $1 million. I went from 0. The first 3 years, I was collecting a good chunk of money, but it wasn't in the right path that I wanted to. And then I switched everything to focusing on how I communicate, focusing on conviction around chiropractic care, and focusing on changing my consciousness. So those are the top 3 sort of core C's, if you would: conviction, consciousness, and communication. And those were the core values, or the pillars on which I was able to build this kind of practice, right?
Can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of what changed before and after with regards to those 3 C's? Like, what did your commitment look like beforehand, afterwards, consciousness, communication? What were some of the big changes that you made?
So let's talk about communication for a second. Mm-hmm. What I was doing prior was what was given to me in a fit into this box kind of idea, right? Like, run this system, it's a 2-day system, 3-day system, say this, here's the script, do this. And again, it was successful, but it wasn't wildly successful. That was the old traditional pattern for chiropractic, right? What had been. So I had to break that pattern. So I put that away. And then in terms of communication, I started to look at, who is my avatar? Who's sitting in front of me that I want to have an authentic, real connection with, but also next level, that anyone any associate, any new DC, any DC with a decent communication skills can also sit in front of them and have the same kind of conversation. So once I determined who my avatar was and who I wanted to speak with, then I figured, what are their pains? What are their struggles? And then from that, I created my systems. I created my ways of communication, and I plugged in their verbiage into all of my systems and all of my communication. So now I've custom made this entire, like every little bit of what goes into my practice. And that was massively successful because now I've created a subculture inside of the clinic. And this is one of the principles I teach. And in the subculture, it grows like wildfire because people show up and they're like, oh, this is my jam. This is my place. Everybody's like me. They speak my language. And it's not cookie cutter. It's like cookie cutter. It's custom because I'm speaking to the avatar, but it is the same verbiage every time because my avatar is always going to be the same. Because ultimately, I want to leave the practice. I want to have an associate, any associate, be able to repeat the same things I've put in place and have the same conversion and have the same results, reproducible results happen inside of the clinic.
Can, in that idea of kind of identifying who your audience was and getting some clarity in around their language, their fears, their frustrations, can you give me an example of maybe something that you added in that wasn't there beforehand? I needed to talk about this, or here's a change that I made to a report of findings so it felt like it was speaking more directly to that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'll give you an example of someone I worked with recently, one of my private clients. When I first took them on, they're in downtown San Francisco, big city. They sit at a desk. They're millennials, and they're younger. They don't have we figured what this population's concern was. Posture. I'm just starting to get aches and pains. I'm starting a family. I want to be more active. I used to be an athlete. So we kind of mapped out and surveyed their audience first. Now, prior to doing this, they had just picked up whatever they had picked up from the previous practice management group. So they're going through a spiel. Here's your brain. Here's how it sends energy down into the spine. It goes into the organs. Subluxations do this. It shuts down the... Well, okay, when we went through that, we realized that none of that related to this target audience.
Yes.
That language was written for probably a 50-year-old woman who has chronic fatigue and is afraid that their organs are going to fail. And so when you say the subluxations, they shut down the energy that goes into the organs and the organs are not going to function. And if that's your way of educating, you're not going to communicate well what is chiropractic to this audience. So one of the first things I do with my clients is have them survey, and we have a whole process for this. Survey your idea. First of all, come up with who's your avatar, and then survey them so that we have some verbiage we can work with. So this practice, they swapped the language, right? They started to input the things that their avatar cared about. And in a matter of 4 weeks, and that was the only change that we did in terms of doing that, in a matter of 4 weeks, they had better conversions. They had more referrals just from those 4 weeks. They're already a really successful practice in those. They had more referrals on average per person, better conversions, and they obviously, as a result, then you collect more, right? Yeah. Because you're helping more people.
What does it makes in marketing? I'm forever talking about getting really clear on who you're communicating to, and we tend to, in practice, get stuck in these kind of scripts that just assumes that everybody is the same. They're two. There's such a beautiful example. They're two. How did you go about improving your conviction?
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I got lucky there because I was just kind of swimming in neck and back pain patients at the time. And I had this patient that walked into my practice. Her name is Megan. And I started to work with Megan. She had been brought by her boyfriend at the time. Boyfriend was a patient of mine for about a year. And he kept coming in. And every time I would see him, he would say, I got to bring Megan in. I got to bring Megan in. And I said, okay, bring Megan in. And I would try to educate and whatever. Then when I first sat down with Megan, of course, she came in with sciatica, lower back pain, acute stuff. And then once I sat down with her, we realized she had over 30 different conditions, right? We all have these in our practice.
Yep.
High blood pressure, anxiety. She's on a list of medications, tingling, numbness, all kinds of stuff. And so I started working with Megan, and Megan started to feel better. I mean, sometimes we get jaded by these miraculous things that are happening literally in front of us. And that was me at the time. She starts to feel better, and she brought in her daughter, Audrey. Now, Audrey, by the time she got to my office, she had already had multiple surgeries because she was born with congenital heart failure. And she was on a list of medications of her own. And I started working with Audrey, and Audrey started to feel better. She came off of her breathing treatment. She was like 3 or 4 at the time, came off of her breathing treatments, a lot of her medications. And now mom is allowing her to go out and play, whereas before it wasn't allowed because she would just get sick. And fast forward, I was like, I need to do some testimonials for my patients, right? I need to put something on my website that's a video of somebody in who I want to see, like a mom and a kid who are well spoken, and they can kind of be the face and say, Dr. Nona is great, come here to this practice. So I asked Megan, and I asked a few other of my patients to show up on a Saturday, hired a videographer. And this is the moment where it absolutely changed my life and my practice forever. I had 3 questions for Megan, for all the patients that were there. But specific to Megan, I asked her a last question, and I said, Megan, what would your life be like if you didn't come here? And that's a question everybody should have their video testimonials, whatever they're asking, because it comes up that wouldn't normally come up. And so I watch Megan, and Megan gets teary-eyed, and she pauses, and she gets super internal, and she starts crying. And I'm thinking, like I said, I'm so jaded over here. I'm thinking, I'm so self-centered, and I'm thinking, well, crap, like, what did I say? Did I say the wrong thing? What did I do? And what she said next completely shocked me. She said, 2 days before I walk into your practice, I was going to commit suicide because I didn't feel like I was a good mom to Audrey. And in that moment, chiropractic I just got goosebumps telling the story. I get goosebumps every time I'm asked about it. And I really got lucky there when it comes to conviction. But that was the moment I realized that chiropractic had very little to do with neck pain and back pain, and so much to do with giving people their life potential as a result of allowing them to live pain-free, and as a result of allowing them to have an unsubluxated life and having them express their full potential. And I was just blind to it. I didn't see it. And so that is the kind of conviction that I'm able to pass on now to my staff. And now, of course, when consulting or with my part-time $1 million chiropractors, passing that on to them and their team members, because if you don't have that, you can have the best communication, you can have the best marketing, you can have the best of everything, but you don't have that, it's going to be a problem. You're going to have to work a lot harder.
When you think about so many of the studies in around communication that say just how little it is with the words, excuse me, and there's an element of it that is body language and tone and stuff like that. But I think the vast, excuse me, majority of it there is really that conviction underneath of who we are communicating the message there. And then what about with your consciousness? What had to change there to move towards this part-time $1 million practice?
I think that is also another big one. I mean, all these C's are important. Conviction for me is like the main foundation, and consciousness is the expansion of consciousness, right? Like being able to see the possibility that you can have, even though I haven't seen anybody else do it, even though I haven't, I haven't been around, I haven't been in a practice that has done that in the way that I want to do it. So seeing that possibility, and it has a lot to do with the mindset that you are bringing into it. So when it comes down to consciousness, there are two ways that I see and I teach that you can expand it. One is physically expanding your consciousness. The other one is mentally expanding your consciousness. An example of a physical, I don't know if you know Dr. Zeno, who's like a high volume, right? So we've worked on a few projects together now, but back in the day as a young chiropractor, I was stuck at a specific number. Then I went and I did, at the time he was doing these things called the Zeno experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd go to his office and I paid like, I don't know, $5,000 or $8,000 to go and check out his office practically. So I go and I watched him see, at the time, I think I wanted to see 250 and I was stuck at 200, right? Yes. Like now looking at it, it's like such a small shift, but my consciousness was blocked. So I go and I saw his clinic and I watched him adjust 250 people on a Friday morning.
Yeah.
And so physically experiencing that, being in the presence of someone who has that next level, that physically expanded my consciousness.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so experiences like that, like going and test driving the car you want and going with your realtor and seeing that next house you want or driving around the neighborhood, those are all physical expansions and breaking a pattern of what you are used to, right? Mm. The second way is you mentally expand your consciousness. And you do that by, instead of physically going to a Zeno office or physically experiencing these things, because they're not always available to us, but what is available to us is our brain, our mind, that we can use as a tool. So how can I expand my consciousness mentally? Well, I could keep this vision that I have, that I've created, that's a seagull, that's juicy, that's expansive, that inspires me, that's exciting. And I can keep that in my mind repetitively. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, I make myself available to the things that are juicy, to the opportunities that will get me closer to that thing. So those are my go-to things in terms of expanding the consciousness of a chiropractor, of an entrepreneur, of an individual, to be able to take them to that next level.
With the clients that you work with, Nona, is there one of those that tends to be missing more than the other? And is there one that they have difficulty with more than the other?
Out of the 3 C's?
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I feel, I'm going to say conviction is definitely missing, or it's definitely not where it should be with most chiropractors. And even though the other 2 are also missing, maybe at the same rate, but I feel conviction is the underlying, like you have conviction, you'll communicate well. You have conviction, you will take the steps to expand your consciousness naturally. So I think that one is more foundational.
Yeah, I got obsessed. I realized that was what was missing for me in the early days, was that conviction, of which for me, I referred to it as certainty. And I had an entry into chiropractic with a really strong philosophical background. I read numerous green books. I loved all of that, but it didn't quite satiate that analytical part of my brain. And it wasn't until I really came across the likes of Dan Murphy and James Chestnut that I went, that was that little final piece of the puzzle that really made me feel bulletproof. I needed that element of science in there to kind of round out that conviction. And it was, it was what turbocharged everything in my practice to have that. Because unfortunately, there'll be new practitioners that won't have had the experience like you've had with Megan and her daughter. And I could hear all these stories and I would go, well, that's great for you, Nona, because clearly you're a gifted chiropractor, but that's you, not me. And so how do you help people find that conviction if they haven't had those experiences? So, consciousness wise, we can imagine that we can go and experience it. Are there ways to get to that conviction if somebody doesn't have it?
Yeah. And even if they have it and they want to pass it on to somebody. So I do this exercise with my chiropractors I'll tell you about. I do want to say that you are so on point in saying that the research, the left brain. So I know today's conversation somehow took a right brain conversation, but I'm actually very analytical. I did CBP, chiropractic biophysics.
Yes.
So all of school, I was looking for the x-ray. I was looking for the results. I was looking for the before and afters. The research was like my go-to. And that gave me some conviction, but of course, a real experience that I had with Megan that I wish on nobody, by the way.
Yes.
That was the thing that kind of brought it to the heart, if you would. Like, I know this works, but look at the impact that it's making on people, right? So to answer your question, there's a game I play with my staff members, and then I pass this on to my part-time $1 million chiropractors. It's called the possibilities game. Mm-hmm. So what that means is, and this is a great exercise to do in your team meetings, you sit down with your team members and you pick a case. Maybe it's a mom with chronic headaches, and maybe she just got started, or maybe she's about to start care, or maybe she's halfway through or had a re-exam, doesn't matter. But you start, and another tip here, pick the most pain in the butt patient. Okay, if you're going to do a case study, pick the most pain in the butt patient. So maybe they missed their appointments, maybe were kind of difficult, or whatever. And you pick that person and you go through the room with your staff, or if you're by yourself on your own, and you play the possibilities game. All right, well, this mom's coming in. She's got 2 kids. She's got chronic daily headaches. She's got a husband. She is coming in for care. Now, what happens if she doesn't? What happens if she doesn't get chiropractic? Like, really, truly understand. What are the possibilities for the life of this mom, for the relationship with her spouse, and for the relationship with her kids, and the future of her kids? Well, let's break this down. I can already, being a mom of 2 kids, I can tell you what she's feeling and what might be a possibility. I don't have to say that with certainty. I can say this is a possibility. It's possible that these chronic daily headaches are creating lack of intimacy in her relationship because she's just suffering so much that she can't be present with her husband. Mm-hmm. It's possible that it's taking away from her duties as a wife or as a mom because she's getting these headaches and she's got to sit in a dark room for 2 hours. It's possible that her kids are feeling abandoned as a result of her having to go away and take a nap or be in a dark room because she's suffering with migraines. What is possible for the future of the kids where they're in a marriage or a family that is not connected because the mom is experiencing headaches? What is possible for the future of these kids who feel that they are not loved enough by their parents or by their mom, but solely because she's got headaches, not because she doesn't love them? What is possible for this entire family and the next generation after that? And when you really sit down and you take a deep dive into that with your staff or on your own, that gets you into conviction. And then you're fired. So now your staff, speaking of, kind of, inspiring the group, they're not doing the tasks because it's on a list. They're calling that mom who's a pain in the butt and no shows to her appointment because they're like, that is what is a possibility for you. And I'm responsible for that. I'm calling you every day until I get you in here.
Yeah, I love that. When I think about business and practice, I think we get paid in proportion to the problems that we solve. And I think you're more valuable as a chiropractor when you're solving a potential relationship breakdown, a mother of a child, a mother's whole entire health, as opposed to just seeing yourself as removing headaches. It's the same patient, but what problem are you solving? It was a little bit like you're talking about with regards to the San Francisco chiropractor. What problem are you solving for these people? Is it just the aches and pains they've got because they're sitting at a desk, or is it their ability to prevent or slow down aging, to keep them active, to keep them moving? No, I'm fascinated by all of this. I've loved our conversation today. If our listeners want to find a little bit more about you, if they want to get your book, if they want to learn more about the part-time $1 million practice, where's the best spot for them to go? How do they hang out with Nona more?
I'm pretty accessible despite all the all the hype. So social media, probably Instagram is a really good place to connect with me. And then of course my website has a bunch of different informations. I run free master classes for chiropractors. We do group coaching. I'm currently full for private coaching in this moment. And we do retreats. They're also sold out. But there's so many different ways to work with me, and the website, probably nonadjavid.com, is the best place to get started.
Yeah, beautiful. Nona, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. I've loved every moment of our conversation, and I look forward to us doing it again, because I feel like we've only just touched on the surface of many of the things that we wanted to touch. So thank you for all the lives that you're touching, and thanks for all the wisdom that you're sharing. And I really look forward to chatting with you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.